So, good afternoon. My name is Matthew Fleissig, and I'm here interviewing Ury-Edelman on August 9th, 2025, as part of our oral history project. So, Evie, welcome. And
Evie.
Evie Edelman. Thank you. And so, tell me about your experience growing up in Great Neck.
Well, I have to think about it because I'm not used to being this old. I'm 78, and I've lived in Great Neck since I was 4 years old. We moved here from Queens. I grew up in Strathmore, and it was very ecumenical. My neighbors were Catholic. We were all different religions mixed into one, people from all over. We played with each other in the neighborhood. We played stickball at night, and our parents would call us in for dinner. It was a whole different world. When people went away, they'd leave their doors open. If you had to go to the bathroom or wanted a piece of fruit or a drink of water while you were playing in the street, you just ran into one of your neighbors' houses. Of course, your neighbors disciplined you also. If you were being a bad girl, they would know. And all the families were friends. When the lights went out or we had a snowstorm, we'd hang out in one person's house and they'd build a fire in a fireplace and light candles, and everybody would bring food and wine, and it would be like a big party.
What was the street and what was the address you lived on?
We lived on Old Pond Road.
And what was the
in
house
Strathmore.
number? The house number?
68.
Yeah.
65. 68? It's a long time ago. 65, I think it was. Oh dear. A senior moment. And we became very, very close friends with all our neighbors. I think one of the people who you're interviewing was one of my neighbors who's come in, who also lived on Old Pond Road.
What was the name?
Emmanuel.
Okay, yes.
Okay. And they lived in Great Neck forever. Their parents lived in Great Neck. I went to the first class in Clover Drive, or was it, yeah. And then I went to Saddle Rock, and we had a song, and I had a booklet, and I'm not going to sing the song for you.
What was the name of the song?
Saddle Rock, the Pride of Great Neck. But I do know the song, but I'm not singing it. It was great. You walked to school. There weren't buses picking you up. It was safe to walk to school. It was safe to walk home from school. Sometimes we would walk the long way, and sometimes we'd cut through the swamp, which wasn't a beautiful garden then. On Saturday afternoon, my parents would give us, I had an older brother, spending money, and we would walk from our house to the old village. And I guess it was the corner of Broker, across from Dunkin' Donuts. In that funny little house, there was a candy store.
Do you remember the name of the store?
Gulkis's, and across from that on Middle Neck Road was Wiener's. They were both candy stores. And we would buy our 5 cents or 25 cents worth of junk and then walk home, perfectly safe. We would walk everywhere.
In case I forgot, what was the year that your family moved to Great Neck?
Well, I was born in 46 and I moved to Great Neck when I was 4.
Okay, so 1950. Okay.
Most people only had one car. It wasn't competitive at all. My parents had emigrated from Europe, so they were the only ones on the block who locked their door.
What country?
Berlin. So they
Germany.
got out before. They were the only people on the block who locked their door, but everybody knew everybody else. And you didn't use their first name. It was Uncle Shirley, Aunt Shirley and Uncle Harold or something like that. When other families would go travel and they'd come back, they always brought little gifts for all the children in their group in the neighborhood. It was just a completely different way of life.
Do you remember any gifts that you got specifically?
The people across the street went to Israel, which was like, wow, that's so far away. And they brought me back a teeny little Torah, and that was like earth-shattering. We belonged to Bethel, so the old Bethel, which was a beautiful, beautiful building
Temple Bethel, right?
before they built that ugly wall. It had a garden in the front, and it was a circular drive, and it was very, very pretty. They belonged to Israel, so it was Great Neck Synagogue, which was later. Bethel and Israel, that was it. And one of my best friends went to St. Mary's and belonged to the Catholic Church, so I used to go to services with her and say Our Fathers and the Hail Marys, and she used to come to temple with me.
What was the name of the St. Mary's school? What was the name
St. Mary's.
It was a church, or it was a Catholic school?
It was a church.
It was a church.
St. Aloysius Church.
Oh, that's
in the old town.
So they changed it.
No, it was St. Aloysius, and then they went to St. Mary's, which was it's on Middle.
That's what I was going to ask you.
On Northern Boulevard, in Manhasset, I think, on the right-hand side. But we were all friends, and it didn't matter, and what religion was or anything. It wasn't important. Everybody felt safe, and the people in the shops, you knew their first names. The toy store was Big Top, and there was Jay's, and that's where you could buy toys if you weren't going to, like, Macy's or somewhere like that. And you knew everyone's name in the shop. The shopkeepers all knew you.
Where were those two toy stores located?
On Middle Neck Road. You're not from here, are you?
Oh.
No. Okay. The only Chinese restaurant was on the Miracle Mile. It was called Liang's. I don't know how authentic it was, but when we went out for Chinese food, we went there. And a big, big treat was at the end of the overpass going to Greenvale, that long overpass. There was a restaurant called the Blue Spruce Inn, and that was like where you went for a birthday.
Where was that located?
At the end of the overpass, on the right-hand side, where there's a shopping center now. Then there was Lorraine Murphy and Patricia Murphy, the two Murphy sisters, and one had the best popovers, and one had sticky buns. So that was a big treat.
And that was in the same area?
That was on Northern Boulevard, closer to Great Neck. Okay. There was one bakery called Strickoff's, and that was where, what is there now? Where CVS is in that area on Middle Neck Road, and where Everfresh is, right next to the firehouse, which they have tables and chairs. There was a bar called McDonald's, and that's where, when we were old enough, we would hang out after a date, and they had a pool table, and they carded you when you went in to make sure you were old enough to drink, which we weren't. But when you came back from college, if you wanted to meet up, and if you knew you were going to meet somebody, even if you didn't plan to meet somebody, that's where you went after a date, and that's where everybody was. That was the place. And then after school, you went to Old Town, which was also where CVS was. There was a strip of stores, Strickoff's, and then Old Town, and a couple of others, but Old Town was like a luncheonette, and you went there and got Cokes and French fries. We had an ice cream store called Kriegel's. That was on the corner of Middle Neck Road, where there used to be a furrier, Kegel's, but first there was an ice cream parlor, and then it was a fruit store recently that went out of business.
Remember the name?
That had homemade ice cream, and then we had a Jan's at one point, and then we used to go shopping at B. Altman's, which doesn't exist,
Where
on the
was
Miracle
that?
Mile, and Arnold Constable on the Miracle Mile. And there was a Gertz shopping center, which then, maybe it was A&S or Stearns first, or Wanamaker's, but it ended up being Gertz while we were growing up. What else?
So I know you were here since 1950, and I was wondering, do you have any memories of the bus, when they started the busing?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
When I was in junior high, I was still walking to school. But you could walk through people's backyards. They didn't care. And during the 1920s, when Great Neck was restricted, all the houses on Fairview in that area had what they called an easement in the backyard, so you could walk without walking on the street to the Long Island Sound, which wasn't polluted, and swim. When we came here, we used to go to Stepping Stone Park, and you could still go swimming. It wasn't polluted, and it was open to all residents.
What do you have any memories of seeing any famous people who lived here?
Oh yeah.
Yes, can you tell me about some of them?
Sid Caesar I used to play with. Her daughter and I were great friends, Shelley, and we used to play together all the time. So she'd come to my house or I'd go to her house, and I would see him in the morning in his pajamas, like Saturday morning, because he wasn't working, so he'd be sitting at the breakfast table having coffee, just like any other father. But he was very sweet and very nice, and no different. Alan King, I think it was, yeah. He used to stand outside at the front of his house and be funny. Who else?
Do you have any
I don't
specific
remember.
memories of his routines that he would do in front of his house? Or?
Yeah, he'd just be goofy. Yeah, he loved kids, and he was just friendly to everyone in the neighborhood. It was a great place for someone like who's famous to live, because they just kind of fit in, and they weren't treated like they were something special. They were treated like anyone else was in the area. Most people were a little higher, I think, than middle class. But I don't know anything about finances when I was a kid. You got your allowance and that was it. Sometimes you sat up front and had a lemonade stand, and people bought lemonade for 10 cents or whatever.
Where would those stands be? Like
In front of your house.
In front of the house.
You know, you had nothing to do. A group of kids would come over and we'd make lemonade, or one of the mothers would make it, and then we'd sell it to whoever drove by. We'd stop them, and either they'd stop and they wouldn't stop or whatever. I'm trying to think. Then we had Parkwood Pool, but that was later.
Where was that located?
If I told you, you wouldn't even know. It's hard to explain.
Explain.
It's
please.
near Steamboat Road.
Okay.
There was that park. I don't know. Parkwood is the big one in town now. No, there was a different pool. There was one on Steamboat Road that Strathmore people went to, and then there had been another pool off of maybe Ravine and going down towards Middle Neck Road, towards Northern Boulevard, but I don't remember the names of them.
Do you have any memories of like the vast mansions and estates that you remember seeing past?
Friends of mine had a fabulous house, an old one, not the new ones, an old one on Kings Point Road. They had 4 or 5 children. I was friends with the daughter and the son. And they had a beautiful, beautiful old house, and they had a rose garden, which was, they didn't keep it up.
What was their name, the family's name?
Not giving it out.
Okay.
I dated the son for a while, and the house was absolutely fabulous if you like that stuff, and I was always interested in that sort of thing. They didn't have a pool, but we used to go swimming in the Sound, because it was right on the Sound. And they had a stables which wasn't used. And then there was a house on the point that had horses. And I remember one half day of school, everybody rode their horses into town and parked in front of the high school. That was fun. I didn't have a horse in Strathmore.
So what high school did you go to?
Great Neck North.
Great Neck North.
My brother went to North when it was split session before South was built. But I was young then. What else?
So what have been some of the changes that you've seen since you started living here and now?
Well, the people are different. It's like everyone used to be friendly. You knew your neighbors. You knew your other people from Temple or from school. You knew their neighbors. It's like everybody knew everyone else. It was like a small village. Now, it's totally, you don't even know who your neighbors are sometimes. If I wanted to borrow a cup of sugar or something, I would just knock on a neighbor's door, or an egg or whatever, my mother, whatever. I know my neighbors because they live next to me, but I don't know the people across the street. And we knew everybody in Strathmore.
Were you ever involved in any community organizations or while you lived
Well,
here?
Strathmore used to have, they had the park. I don't even know familiar with Strathmore, but they have a pond
Explain. Yeah.
and they have a park, and the park was wonderful. Everybody would play ball there and swing on the swings, and they used to have barbecues there with the whole neighborhood, and then they used to have the Strathmore dinner dance once a year. And everybody got decked out for that. That was really important. It was usually at Engineers Country Club or something like that.
Where was that located, Engineers Country?
Roslyn somewhere, I don't know.
Yeah, so can you tell me about the dance? Like what was there? Who came?
Everyone came from Strathmore. That was the only people that were allowed to come.
What was the type of
And
music? Or
they had music and food.
any famous people ever come to that? Or
I don't know.
no? So also, I also forgot to ask about you. So what did you do after high school? Where'd you go to college? What
I
line of
went
work
to
did you get
college.
in?
I went to college in, outside of Philadelphia, and then I transferred to Nassau Community, and I went to Hofstra for a while.
What did you study? What did you major in?
Nothing. Liberal arts.
And then what did you do for work after?
I got married.
Okay.
I worked as a textile designer in the home furnishings trade. Then I worked as a corporate travel consultant until they changed the laws and you weren't getting 10% commission on everything, which ruined the whole industry for everyone. And now I make high-end jewelry.
Oh, very nice.
So that's my third career.
So do you what are any of your memories about the library since you've were a kid?
The
Where was it?
library was
How
at
did it
Great Neck
change?
House.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful old building, and I remember that the children's library was downstairs, and they had Della Robbia's. I don't know if you know what those are.
Can you explain, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
They're sculptures. They're sculptures that are round, and usually blue and white, I think in yellow, and they're Italian. And I don't know if they were real or not, but I assume they were real. And they were on the walls, and they were beautiful. Librarians were great. They were very helpful. It was a fun place to hang out when I was young. It was a safe place, and like everything was safe. I could walk there from home, though it's a long walk. On that corner, not across from it and Caddy Corner on the corner, was originally a funeral home. That goes back many, many years. And then after that was an Italian.
Do you know the name of the funeral home?
Of course not. Excuse me. There was an Italian restaurant that served pizza. Now, I have no idea what that was called either. There were 3 different delis in Great Neck. Now there's only Kensington left.
Right. Do you remember the names of any of the delis?
Yes, Nelson's, and of course Squires. I
Right.
mean, you must have heard the original Squires was absolutely amazing. We had the 2 movie theaters, and everybody went to the movies on Saturday night. And then we went to Squires either before or after.
And where are the movie theaters located?
On Middle Neck Road.
And what were the names? One
The
was
Playhouse and the Squire.
Okay. What movies do you remember seeing when you were a kid at those?
Oh, God. Peter Pan.
Mm.
That was my favorite. And then I saw it again as an adult, and wow, was that racist. Woo. But when you're a kid, you don't notice that stuff. You're not interested in that until you get brainwashed. Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, Bambi, all the fun stuff. We didn't have video games. We didn't have cell phones. If you said you were going to meet somebody, you met them. Otherwise, there was no way in getting in touch with them. If you didn't show up within 15 minutes, they knew you weren't coming.
Were there anyone from the school, any teachers you had, or anyone from your temple that served as an inspiration for you while growing up?
My teachers. I had wonderful teachers, especially in grade school, mainly in Saddle Rock. And I had a few in junior high, 1 or 2 in high school.
Do you remember any of the names?
Yeah, Mrs. Daw.
You don't have to give the first.
Oh, yes. I remember a lot of them, their names. Interesting enough, when I moved back here after I was married, a couple of them were still there, and my son had them.
What so that's a good segue. What so two questions I have is, what do you think attracted about Great Neck attracted your parents to settle here?
Long Island Railroad. It was, my father worked in Manhattan, and it was an easy ride that attracted many, many, many people.
And then what made you decide to move back here?
My parents were old and needed to be around them,
Gotcha.
needed to care. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have left. I would have gone somewhere else.
And what do you think attracted the famous celebrities that came here?
Great Neck's always been a place for celebrities. The mansions, the lifestyle, the closeness to Manhattan, because you could be in Manhattan in 40 minutes. So if they were working on Broadway, piece of cake if you didn't want to drive.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Evie, and we really appreciated it.